Israel has amassed troops around Rafah, hours after the defense minister announced a major expansion of the military offensive in Gaza. Israel Katz says large areas will be seized and incorporated into Israel's security zones. Artillery fire and airstrikes in the early hours of Wednesday have killed at least 21 Palestinians across the Strip. More than 1,000 people have been killed since Israel broke the ceasefire on March the 18th. The families of Israeli captives have denounced the government's decision to expand the offensive in Gaza. In a statement on social media, the families asked whether the hostages were being sacrificed for the sake of territorial gains. They go on to accuse the Israeli government of sending more soldiers into Gaza instead of securing the release of the hostages through a deal and ending the war. The families say the responsibility for the release of the 59 hostages held by Hamas lies with the Israeli government, and they are concerned this mission has been pushed to the bottom of its priorities. So on Tuesday, Israel expanded its forced evacuation orders for Palestinians living in northern Gaza. It issued new orders for Beit Hanun, Beit Lahia, and several other neighborhoods, warning Palestinians to leave or risk being killed. Israel says Palestinian factions have been launching rockets from the area into its territory. The military has ordered people to go to what it calls safe evacuation zones in Gaza City, but it has repeatedly attacked these areas. Tahani Mustafa is a senior Palestine analyst with the International Crisis Group. You're joining us from Amman. Tahani, it's good to have you on the program. So your first thoughts when you saw this ground offensive beginning today, when you got the news? I mean, we've seen the writing on the wall for a few days now. But it started this morning. What did you think?
Well, I mean, it really didn't come as much surprise, I think, for many of us, especially those of us that were monitoring things since the restart of Israel's open warfare on Gaza, where we'd seen Israel order evacuations of parts of Gaza near its border. That was affecting something like 35,000 people, many of whom had returned to these areas during the ceasefire. And I think many of us were anticipating that these evacuation zones were going to be expanded in the coming months and weeks in order to concentrate Palestinian populations into these so-called safe zones, which we know, from in retrospect over the last 17 months during open warfare, that there is no such thing as safe zones. Israel has managed and still continues to manage to ensure that no area of the Strip is untouched by its ongoing bombardment. But in any case, many of us did anticipate the concentration of Palestinians into these so-called safe zones while Israel continued to depopulate much of the Strip. And we've already seen, much of that in the way of the way that it has retaken the Netzrim corridor, cutting the Strip in half, expanding it to effectively, quite literally, cut the Strip in half. And now we're seeing Israel threaten, its recent maneuver today in order to apply pressure, so-called pressure on Hamas.
So the Israeli defense minister, again, and this is what I was discussing with Tariq, our correspondent in the Strip, says he wants to capture territory. This seems to us, to be new. Because under the Biden administration, I know that feels like eons ago, but under the Biden administration, the U.S. had a very clear policy that Gaza's territory should not be shrunk by Israel. And now Israel is talking about taking territory and adding it to its own, buffer zone. I'm not sure what they're calling it.
Well, look, the Biden administration really didn't have any significant red lines, and we constantly saw those goalposts shift each time Israel managed to change reality on the ground. So even if rhetorically they didn't really support the idea of seeing Gaza's territory shrink, what we were actually seeing on the ground was something else entirely. But now, the reality is very different. The international reality is very different. We're now working with not just an incredibly expansionist Israeli government, where we've seen the return of some extreme elements of the far right since the announcement of the unilateral breaking of the ceasefire from Israel's side. But more importantly, they're now backed by a U.S. administration that really doesn't see any need to do with the facade of trying to kind of broker any sort of rhetorical peace here, or try to pretend like it's trying to be an impartial broker in this conflict. The Trump administration itself has already hailed the depopulation of Gaza. It has already outlined the contours of a potential plan of turning Gaza into effectively a holiday resort. So that really, if anything, kind of undermines a lot of what we've been hearing over the last 17 months from the international community, and more significantly, gives Israel the complete green light now to act with complete impunity, where we can't even expect the most modicum, of rhetorical condemnation at this point.
What's the ultimate goal?
Well, many would say that Israel doesn't really have an end goal or an objective, but I think, as we've seen in the last 17 months, that's not necessarily true. It's very clear that Israel, it may not necessarily know what the reality is going to look like, the end reality, but the goal here is effectively depopulating Gaza. What we have seen over the last 17 months, and we will continue to see, is an extension of Israel's policy in Gaza since 2007, which is to make the Strip completely uninhabitable for its population. Granted, we've seen that accelerated at a far faster pace since October 7th. But what we are now seeing is really what many of us have predicted from the outset, which was you're going to see Gaza quite literally razed to the ground. It's going to be completely uninhabitable for whatever remains of the population. While Palestinians that do remain, if they haven't been forcibly pushed out or killed, will end up in smaller and smaller patches of territory, reliant on aid for everything. But to expect any serious permanency of Palestinians in Gaza, or for Israel to really allow for any kind of serious reconstruction or Palestinian-type entity to be governing Gaza, to ensure that there is something there for Palestinians, that I think is going to be incredibly unrealistic. That is not what we're seeing. Israeli politicians have made no secret of that. They are quite open in their plans to ensure that there is quite literally nothing left for Gazans by the end of this.
Yeah, and we are fast getting to the point of uninhabitable. I mean, bakeries have closed. There are only a few days left of flour. The World Food Programme says it only has about a week or 2 weeks left of hot meals, even by reducing rations. Tahani Mustafa, Senior Palestine Analyst with the International Crisis Group, thank you.
Thank you.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.